Welcome to the Good News Express International, an inspirational program designed to explore how the good news of the gospel changed ordinary lives into extraordinary believers. Join prophetic teacher Bonnie Jones as she gathers testimonies of believers from around the globe, from the unknown to the well-known, from the hidden to the forefront, and everywhere in between. Express the impact of the good news of Jesus. And now, here is your host, Bonnie Jones.
Welcome to the Good News Express, where everyone's testimony is important because it's a testimony of Jesus, and we want to hear what he has done in your life. You know, everybody's testimony is important. No two testimonies are the same. They can be very similar, but they're unique because you're unique. Today, we want to introduce Scott Swires. He is in Rome, New York, and he is with the Salvation Army. I believe are you a general?
Not a general, that's a top guy. I'm low on the totem pole. I'm a lieutenant.
Well, you're high on the Lord's list, but we want Scott to share today his life. I know he was raised in a Salvation Army family, but I know that God has done a great work in him. He's a mighty man of God, hears well from the Lord. And what I really love about Scott, one of the many things I love about Scott, is that he's obedient to what he hears. So Scott, I'd like you just to share your life with us and begin as how and when you heard the voice of God, how he began to work in your life, and how the good news has affected your life.
All 4 decades.
All 4 decades, yeah. Yes.
I think it's always interesting because even in our church, it seems like one of the things people always talk about is, when did you get saved? And I've never had one of those clear moments to just say, oh, this was like the moment. But one of the earliest times I can remember really thinking like, I really am having this relationship with the Lord. I was like about 5, and I grew up with parents who grew up in the Salvation Army, but also a dad that grew up in Assemblies of God. So he practiced praying in tongues and interpreting tongues.
And they don't do that in the Salvation Army, is that right?
Not typically.
Okay, I
not
didn't think so.
We have some supernatural stories that are part of our deeper heritage that somehow have gotten lost along the way, that peek out every once in a while. But it was definitely not a common thing. It's become much more common.
So how do you think if the supernatural operated in Salvation Army long ago, like its spiritual roots, then how do you think over the centuries it got lost, or why wasn't it maintained?
I think it's just one of those things where people stick to whatever they heard last. And they just keep trying to do that thing without hearing and listening for the next thing, without actively listening. So just this past Sunday, I kind of talked about that with our congregation. And I talked about how we talked about Luke 14 in the parable of the wedding feast that's happening, the feast, the dinner party that's happening. And how in that group you have Jesus talking to the Pharisees, and they give these 3 excuses that are happening. The one excuse is somebody just got land. Another person said, I just bought ox. And another person said, I just got married, and they can't come to the dinner feast.
Right.
And the shocking thing is, if you look at it paralleled with Jeremiah, those are the exact things that Jeremiah said, do this when you're in exile, was to build houses, plant vineyards, and get married.
Right.
So,
that's true.
To me, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and he's warning them, hey, you're living in the past. It's no longer the past. It's a new day. How do you transition to that next day? And I think a lot of churches, and something that has happened over the past year, is a lot of churches are realizing we can't live in those past methods that used to work for us. We need a fresh word from the Lord about how to go forward.
Amen. Amen. So when would you say you began hearing from the Lord? I mean, that you actually heard, I don't know if you ever heard his audible voice, or that you really began recognizing that still small voice.
Young. So when I was young, 5, I remember praying once, and I started to pray in tongues, and it really freaked me out because I didn't understand what was happening.
Yeah.
My dad explained it to me, and it didn't happen for a long time. I ended up having just a difficult time processing, not seeing those signs and wonders, not seeing the power of God. And even before a teenager, I started to struggle with the idea that we don't see it commonplace, especially in America. Some other places, you go to, it's still normal. And a lot of places I went to, and especially the churches I was a part of, we didn't see God manifest. And for me, that was tough. So how do you explain your faith in a God that doesn't show up that way anymore? So for
Right.
me, I kind of came up with two options. I said, either he's a God that used to have power and doesn't anymore. So why is that God worth worship then? Or the option number two was he has the power and he chooses not to use it for his people. And to me, that was a cruel God. So why serve him?
Yeah.
So I never had that moment where I stopped believing that he existed. So he was always there. And I could hear that inner audible voice as he would talk to me and say things. And I was just upset. And then I got mad. And then I got angry. And then I was just outright against God and everything else. Until one day, I was about 16. I was walking on a beach, and I hear the external audible voice of God say to me, pick up that rock. And when I look down at the beach, I see it's a bunch of rocks on this beach. And I pick up this rock that looks like this perfect skipping stone, right? And I pick it up and I think to myself, if I skip this thing, it's going to go really far. So I pick it up and I feel directed like I'm supposed to skip this. So I skip it. And don't you know that thing went right into the water without even making a splash? Went right to the bottom. And I heard the Lord say to me, without me, no matter how perfect things seem, you will fail. So I was like, okay. And then I hear again, pick up that rock. So I looked down, and the only way I could describe the rock that I saw was it looked like a gobstopper from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I mean, it had angles coming out of everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So, and I know that I'm supposed to skip this rock, and I'm thinking, there's no way a rock like this could ever skip. It's impossible. So I skip it, and don't you know that thing skipped so far that I lost sight of it? And the Lord told me and said, with me, no matter how impossible things look, you'll always succeed.
Yeah. That's
The
amazing.
sad thing is, that wasn't enough to get me out of my nasty attitude. I was still angry for a few more years, just angry. And every time I got angry with the Lord, I mean, I would even swear at the Lord, like look up into the heavens and like cuss him out.
Wow.
And then I would just hear this calm voice say to me, I love you.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're ever in an argument, it's almost like you're in an argument and somebody tells you calm down, right?
Yeah, right.
But eventually it started to fizzle out. I would say I had like a Charles Finney experience when I was 18, where I started to wake up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, knowing if I died in that moment, I would go to hell. Just panicked for my soul.
Yeah.
And it took another 3 years to somebody to invite me to a church. And I finally found what I had been looking for. People called me out from the back of a church, prophesied the desires of my heart, and I knew God was. I was that guy.
So it really was hearing what God was saying. I mean, it came through somebody else, but it's that spirit of prophecy that came and touched your heart. And then that turned you around, right?
It really changed me, especially when I read in 1 Corinthians and I saw my exact scenario happen, right? I was the fool in the back of the church, questioning everything, and people prophesied over me. And then I understood, oh, this is all real. It has been real the whole time, and I just hadn't seen it.
Yeah. Did you repent?
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes. Repent so much. The first person I repented to was my mother. I called her absolutely weeping.
Yeah.
Right? I was like, oh, I'm so sorry for everything I just put you through. It was so bad. I, put her through so many dark seasons. So yeah, just redirected. And there's a story about the founder of the Salvation Army. His name is William Booth. At some point he said, God would have all there is of me. And that was my moment. I said, God will have everything of me at that point. I'm sold out. Let's go.
But isn't it nice? I mean, you really was learning the love of the Lord, even though you was really in rebellion, no
Oh yeah.
matter how much you lashed out or whatever, he just kept loving you. So I think that had to really be a saving grace for you, just to really learn the love of the Lord.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And that
yeah,
his kindness really does lead us to repentance.
it does. It does indeed. So, well, because I know you, I know you've had some really awesome experiences. So tell the audience about your maybe your greatest supernatural experience. What would that be?
What's fun is I've had a number of them in my life at different seasons. And I think one thing I want to say is I've never really done prophetic ministry as like my ministry. So I've never been an itinerant minister. I've never gone out. I've worked as a monorail pilot for Disney. I worked for Apple. So I got to have these experiences while still having this, normal life.
Yeah,
And I think
marketplace
sometimes,
ministry, right?
right, a lot of times we make excuses of I'm not in the right place with the right people at the right time. And if you believe in who God is, it's always the right place with the right
That's
people at
right.
the right time.
That's right. And that's really a key, because what I always say is, doesn't matter. You don't have to be behind the pulpit. Any
Hmm.
place that you are, that's your sphere of authority, and you just need to speak
Hmm.
and do whatever the Lord is saying. So let's hear a couple of yours. I think that's awesome.
So I think one of my most fun things is because there are times where God will show up in ministry times, and there are times He shows up and does things, and I still to this day have no idea why did He have this happen, besides just letting me get to see more of Him. So once upon a time, I was a lifeguard for the YMCA with some of my best friends, and we were living together in an apartment. And unfortunately, one of my roommates was one of my bosses, and I had a bad habit of being late. I
Okay.
was supposed to open up the place at 5 o'clock in the morning for early swimmers, and I am not a morning person at all. So one day I wake up and it is very late. It's 4:50, and I have about a 40-minute drive to go open up this YMCA. There's no way that I'm gonna make it on time.
Yeah.
So I get into my little Echo and I start driving down the road. And I still remember the Chris Tomlin song "Indescribable" was on, and for some reason I was like, it's a ridiculous morning. There's no way I'm going to win at this morning. And I just
Yeah.
decided to worship with the song. So I'm just worshiping. Indescribable, uncontainable. I'm driving down the road and then I notice I'm almost out of gas.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I'm already late, right? So I just sing this song and I step out and I pump gas and I get in and I just picked up with the song right where I had left off singing this song. And the crazy thing is, it was on the radio. I wasn't
Oh,
on a
yeah.
CD, it wasn't on my
Yeah.
tape, it was on the radio, and I hadn't noticed that something was different. And as I'm finishing the song, I'm pulling up next to the YMCA that I worked at, and I had actually traveled a 40-minute commute in the length of that one song
Wow. So that's like
after
5
stopping for
minutes or
gas.
something. Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah. So you weren't late for work after all.
I wasn't late. I called my, my friend, my roommate, and I said, "You're never gonna believe what just happened." Um, and
That's
I
awesome.
just have had moments like that where God has just showed up in just strange times just to say, I am who I am and I love you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I wondered, like, the Lord sends me on these long trips. I'm like, could you just translate me there instead of a
Yeah, could I
12-hour
do this
drive?
on purpose? I've yet to get to the place where I can do
Yeah.
this on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think that is. I think he just wants to show us his love for us. So tell us about the time that you caused it not to rain for a while.
I had started to go to that church that called me out of the back of the room and prophesy over me, and it was the first non-Salvation Army church that I had ever attended. At that time, it wasn't a part of the vineyard, but would become a vineyard church.
Hmm.
Uh, and they just started to teach me all these things. And for some reason, I didn't question it. I never questioned what I was being taught. I never questioned when I heard from the Lord, and I would just say whatever I was hearing. For some reason, I was just locked in. And I think that that's what happens when you really come to a place and you're willing to surrender yourself to the Lord. It's amazing how few of the details you have to know.
Yeah.
So I felt just locked into place. And one night, it was in 2002, and I just started to prophesy to the church, saying we're coming into a season of outpouring, and it's an outpouring of the gifts, an outpouring of the teaching, and the teaching of the God is going to start falling on us like rain, and we're going to start to encounter and experience new things. And I said, we're going to come to a time where we really have to decide, are we doing this for the gifts, or are we doing this for the giver? And
Right.
then, as a sign that this word is from the Lord, it is going to start to rain. And that's all I said. And it
Yeah.
started in that moment. It started to downpour outside. So, being in my first really charismatic church, everybody went nuts, right?
Yeah.
And, worship was great. And we left, and it was downpouring. Well, the next morning we woke up and it was still raining.
Okay.
It rained all through that day. Rain had not been in the forecast. And then it kept raining the next day. So for 3 days, it's been raining. And the youth pastor at that time called me and said, Scott, you could pray for it to stop. And he started to talk to me about Elijah and the things that had happened. So I, went into my little prayer closet corner of my room, and I started to pray, and I just prayed for it to stop. And within 30 minutes, it completely stopped and the sun came out.
That's amazing. Did you ever, well, I guess that was you're praying for the end of the rain. Did you ever pray that it would be a drought or not?
I had some encounters at a Salvation Army summer camp where I felt like the Lord was giving me words, and I was still walking out trying to understand the prophetic. In the community that I had, very few prophetic teachers to explain what was going on or what was happening with me. And I was still in a mindset where I just said whatever I heard, which was usually a good thing, but sometimes I could have said it more tactfully. So I was in a meeting and I said, I really feel like this is going to be a spiritually dry summer. And I said a phrase that I had never been taught, but I've heard a lot after. I said, and what happens in the natural is reflected in the spirit and vice versa. And since we're going to have a spiritually dry summer, it's going to be a physically dry summer. And this camp had a lake. And I said, when the drought comes, the drop of the lake will be measured in feet, not inches.
Huh. Wow.
And that summer got so dry that the floating docks that they used to use for the boating program, actually they had to cancel boating because the floating docks were on dry ground because
Oh
the
my
water had
gosh.
dropped so much.
Yeah.
And part of that word was I said, I felt like the Lord was going to give us times of reprieve from this drought, where in intense times of worship, we would feel his presence come and it wouldn't feel so dry in those moments. And that the natural would reflect the spiritual, and it would rain during those times of worship, but it would not impact the drought. And on Wednesday nights, we had a thing called Vespers, and we would worship. And a lot of times in those worship sets for Vespers, there would be a downpour of rain. But as soon as the rain stopped, the ground would be as dry as it was before. It didn't impact the drought whatsoever.
Wow. So that was a real prophetic word from, I was wondering, like when you received that, it reminds me of like the Naba prophet. They don't really know what they're going to say until they open their mouth and they say it. And that's what sounds like what you were doing. I mean, you were, as you was hearing it, just releasing it. And it was the word of the Lord. There wasn't anything added to or taken away from. That was really incredible. And did they scoot you out of the church at that point?
The leaders at that time were not as excited about me hearing prophetic words as I was, because I was still in that moment of, oh my goodness, it really happened.
Yeah, yeah.
I always laugh, Jeremiah at one point, he gives this amazing prophecy, turns to the Lord and says, how do I know this is true? And the Lord says, when it happens, you'll know it was me. So I was still very much in that season of growing in the prophetic.
Yeah, yeah. But that's a good place to be, I mean, you just stepped out in boldness and said, I think sometimes after a while people are like, well, if I say it, they're going to get mad. I'm going to offend somebody, and then they hold back and they don't say it. But I'm glad that you did. I'm looking over here, notes from, the application you sent. And one thing you said is the work of Jesus. I said, how did the good news impact your life? You said, the work of Jesus, the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and the kindness of the Father are my daily survival. So can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
I think it's one of those things where you just have to practice his presence continually. One thing that my wife Tabitha and I talk about is we really try to help people understand that constant aspect of a triune God.
Hmm.
So that's why you see the Trinity in that description is just acknowledging Father, Son, Holy Spirit as being active. And a lot of churches that I've attended or gone to afterward, I've noticed that they tend to focus on one
Hmm.
above the rest.
Right.
And there's not that holistic relationship of Father, Son, Holy Spirit with us. And at some point you have to stop trying to figure it out, accept it, and try to live it out. So we
Yeah.
often recognize that as our work and as our ministry. And while we're trying to do that in our personal life, we believe that if we do it in our personal life, then it manifests out and it just becomes this constant flow. And that's why
Right.
it's like the daily bread. It's that constant flow of trying to recognize I'm in tune with him. He's reaching out to me, and that impacts the community that I'm in. And then there's this beautiful Trinity that's happening with me, God, and others that's constantly happening. And to
Yeah.
recognize that as a daily balance is so important. And I notice in my own life when that balance is out of whack, when I stop listening to God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, when I stop listening to others and I focus on myself, or I get so busy that I think, oh, I have to help these people. I have to do something for others. I have to do this. When I focus too much on others, or even I try to focus on God so much that I forget everything else. When I get out of whack like that, I notice it in my daily life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. It's really important to keep that balance. And I think, with the busyness of life, we can get really lopsided,
Mm-hmm.
and even
Mm-hmm.
ministry can make you lopsided. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you're doing so much for the church or the kingdom or, whatever,
Yeah.
and then it becomes lopsided. So keeping that balance, that's
Yeah.
that's really awesome.
Yeah,
And that's a
Job is
good,
like a perfect example of that. I think if you read the book of Job, he gets the Trinity out of whack, right? He
yeah,
starts to be so self-focused on himself. Even I hear people quote it when he said, "I was eyes to the blind, I defended the orphan and the widow, I plucked the fangs out of the wicked." If you
yeah,
notice in Job, those I statements start to increase as the book
yeah,
goes on, and then
yeah,
he looks at his own friends who are there trying to help him, not doing great, but at least trying to be in community with him, right?
yeah,
He starts to treat them like the enemy. So all of a sudden, God's on trial, his friends are the enemy, and he's the only one that's
yeah,
doing anything right.
yeah, yeah. Job was an interesting person, wasn't he? So, uh, okay. Let me see here. Just okay. You wrote the reality of Christ has never been decided upon my vocation or location, only the openness of my heart to Him in each moment. I think that's really what you've been saying. It's any place that you are,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
that we you may be the only Jesus that somebody ever meets,
Mm-hmm.
you know. First
Yeah.
time I heard that, I thought, what? But yeah, because if you come across somebody that's never known Jesus and you're able to interact with them, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. And how we interact, it's kind of sad that we pigeonhole Christians on what that's supposed to look like.
right.
And I remember one of the first things I had when I married Tabitha. She was very gun ho. She was at the gun ho phase of her faith, where she was just all out, and it had to be all like this, all like this. And there were times that I had grown to believe that you have to evangelize as the Lord leads you to evangelize. It's never a cookie cutter mold.
Mhm.
And I remember I was working for what used to be Borders, the competition of Barnes and Noble.
Oh,
And when I was
okay.
working at Borders, a woman that became a friend started to work there, and she was into Wicca. She was just heavy into the occult. And she came up to me one day and she said, "Oh, I like you because you're spiritual like me." And
What a compliment.
right, and the Lord,
Yeah.
the Lord said, "Agree with her." So I looked at her and I said, "Yep." And then we just would have conversations, and never once did I say, I don't believe in anything that you believe in. You know, I think everything you're doing is sin. I think everything you're doing is wrong. I would just talk to her very openly, very like the only person I've really seen minister like that has been Doug Addison, where Doug Addison says, you know, recognize what part of the journey are you on with that person? Maybe
Right.
you're just trying to show them there's an alternative. Maybe you're
Right.
just saying there's something spiritual out there. Maybe they don't believe in the spiritual at all. Just kind of recognize where you are. So I did that with this person and never said the name of Jesus and never said this. But then after a couple months, she walked up to me and she said, "You're not spiritual like me, are you?" And I looked at her and said, "Nope." And then she said, "Do you go to church?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Can I go to your church with you this Sunday?"
Wow.
And
It's
she still goes there
amazing.
today.
That's
That was
amazing.
almost 20 years ago. She still goes there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So you didn't rebuke her or correct her and just loved on her and led her. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
sometimes those things are necessary, but you really do have to say, you know, Jesus, how are you revealing yourself to this person? And just
Right.
try to come into agreement with it.
Yeah. And you know what's good too in that, Scott, is that you were listening to the Lord. Probably your flesh was going like, I want to really tell her the truth. But
Oh
you
yeah. I don't
were
want to align with witchcraft, right?
no. But in hearing the voice of God, you were able to just obey. And then, it took a little while, but she turned her life around. She
Hmm.
came to you for the truth and the
Hmm.
way and the life. Yeah. Awesome. Well, in kind of wrapping things up here, what would be, well, I just want you to speak your heart and prophetically a word of wisdom to our listening and viewing audience. I keep saying listening, but they're viewing also. But what would be a word of wisdom, a word of prophecy? What would you like to speak from your heart? What do you feel that the Lord is saying to the body of Christ right now?
Don't stop looking until you see Jesus manifested. I think
Wow.
that that's the biggest thing that I've had to learn is don't stop looking. Don't stop looking. Don't stop looking. I want
Mhm.
to say that's something that Jim Goal wrote in one of his books. He talked about how in Daniel you have all these terrible things happening, one after another, one after another. But Daniel says, I kept looking until finally he says, I kept looking until I saw the Ancient of Days seated upon the throne.
Mm,
So I would just say, don't stop looking. You have to assume that God is there. You have to assume that He's intentional. You have to assume that He is for you. You have to check off the things that are safe assumptions that deal with who God is and the nature of His character, and then you have to decide your reality based on those truths. So when everything
sure.
looks the opposite, doesn't matter. Doesn't really matter how it looks. What matters is who He is. So at the end of the day, you got to keep looking until you see Jesus manifested in your story. And that's true of any season. Every
Yeah.
season, you know, I say that the fire always comes no matter what. And
Yeah.
St. Augustine, when he wrote the City of God, he's talking to the Romans after Rome had just got sacked. And all the pagans went, when we worship the other gods, this never happened.
Yeah.
And so Augustine's response was, listen, the fire always comes, but the difference is what you're made of. If you're made out of straw, you get burned up. But if you've been
Yeah.
turned into gold, if you're a believer in the Lord and who He is, if you've been manifested into gold, after that season, you're going to be more valuable than you ever were. So I
Yeah.
just, encourage and feel like people need to hear that right now. Just keep looking until you see Jesus in your situation.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Scott, we thank you for being with us today. And if people want to contact you, if they'd like to hear more of your testimony, or I don't know if you're open for invitations for speaking engagements, but if somebody would want to
Mhm.
contact you, how would they do that?
The best way right now is to go on to our church Facebook page. We're doing a lot with that with the Salvation Army. It's kind of unique. I don't have a personal ministry page. I
Okay.
just have whatever's associated with the church I've been appointed to at that time. And right
Okay.
now, that is Rome, New York, in upstate New York. So if you Google us, you'll find out that we're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And you're able to find out what we're up to and what we're doing. And you're also able to reach out to me or even my wife. Um, she's a fantastic speaker, teacher, prophetic minister in her own right. and has a lot to do. She keeps me in line, so her prophetic words have to be pretty good.
That's right. Now that is Rome, right? Rome.
R-O-M-E. I get to be a Roman. I feel like, should I be reading that book a lot while I'm here? I don't understand.
Well, it could be. Maybe God has a hidden message in there for you. But oh goodness. Well, thank you for being with us. Thank you for all your words of encouragement and sharing your testimony, and I just pray that God continue to bless you and all those that you're ministering to there, raising up little soldiers in the Salvation Army. That's an awesome deed. And so I don't know your rank right now, but I'm sure you'll be a general before long. So we'll call you general.
Right, Lieutenant.
Lieutenant. Okay. All right.
Lieutenant
All right.
Scott. It's so strange to hear Lieutenant Scott.
Lieutenant
People call
Scott.
for me.
Okay. All right. Well, be blessed. And we just want to thank everybody for joining us today. And I hope that Scott's testimony has blessed you. I know that it's blessed me. I always get to learn more as I'm doing these interviews, but it is true that the testimony of Jesus is a spirit of prophecy, and we all can hear from the Lord, and we need to hear and obey what he's saying. And Jesus told us to go into all the nations and preach the gospel. So that's what we have to do. And I believe we're in a time right now where those who have been more hidden, God is bringing them forward. It's humility. God resists the proud, but he exalts the humble. And I feel that those who have been humble and just true to the Lord, mostly hidden in him, that he's bringing them forward now so that his testimony, his light, and his life can be expressed through those. And we around the world get to be a part of that. So if you would like to be a part of the Good News Express, go to our website, click on Good News Express, fill out the application, and we will get in touch with you because we want to hear what God is doing in your life also. So be blessed in all that you do, and we'll see you next time.
We hope that today's testimony has both glorified God and implanted the seed of a new perspective of His love for you. If you are wondering, how can I get my testimony on board the Good News Express, simply go to our website at didyoulearntolove.org and click on the link for the Good News Express. It will take you to the easy to fill out application page. Once you're finished, click Submit.